All right, Mike, let's talk about some technical things, okay? So, you can be a good listener, but if you can't hear, it doesn't matter,
It doesn't
right?
really matter. And that's the biggest gripe and one of the biggest struggles that I've had in my career, and I think we've had a lot of these together, is like, we could just say getting a good mix or getting a good stage sound to where you can hear, because if you're listening or if you have all your skills together, if you're not hearing appropriately and comfortably, then
you're going to have a bad show.
Yeah. You're doomed.
It's so uncomfortable to be in that situation. And it's not even like, we got these in-ears, like even in an in-ear situation, it's not necessarily going to be perfect every time.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you could do as a musician to kind of help avoid that or navigate that situation?
Well, one of the big things that we found as a band touring with Kotzen actually was because we were going through so many nights, but with different monitor engineers every night, and different systems and good speakers, bad speakers, not enough, and to where every night it was hearing the band in a different way. So one of the things we started doing was trying to figure out how we can control our environment a little bit more to make things more consistent. So one of the practices, if you're in a band and you're trying to be able to be a little more consistent here night to night, is we move the amps behind the drums. So the amps are actually hitting me. Like, I'm feeling the air of the amps, and we weren't having to crank them in my monitor as much. So I was hearing exactly how each player is breathing dynamically, feeling the intensity. And then from that point too, I was only taking maybe a little bit of kick drum in my wedge, and a little bit of the lead vocal.
Yeah.
And then a couple of things came from that. One, I heard things because there was more space created. There was less sound coming on stage, like, all that sonic real estate slamming back at you.
Right.
And also I started to realize if I couldn't hear the lead vocal from the front wedge, then my guess would be the lead vocalist, or let me rephrase that. If I can hear the lead vocal clearly from where I'm sitting behind the drums playing, then the vocalist can hear themselves, and they're not straining at that point, and we're not struggling. Then, even no matter if we're playing a big giant festival or we're playing a little tiny club, we're reacting to that environment a little better.
Yeah.
So sometimes positioning and not having to lean on monitors.
Like, don't rely on those monitors.
Yeah.
Like, get your stage volume correct so that you could hear what's going on without that. You just supplement what you really need, to kind of peak out or whatever through that wedge. If you start putting everything in there, it's just too much, and everything gets louder and louder, and that's not going to help the situation. Yeah,
you end up frustrated, and at that point too, and you're showing your frustration to the audience, and you're showing your frustration a lot of times to the monitor guy, and it's creating an overall bad environment. So I'd say first thing with monitoring, see if there's a way you could do it on stage if you're on wedges or using speakers on the ground, floor monitors. Yeah. And then when you get to the in-ears, that's a whole new can of worms, and I feel like I spend most of my life with my in-ears in now. I wear them like I would wear jewelry almost, just like they're an important part of my day to day. But they have their pluses and minuses too. The big plus is on a pop gig, you have to hear a lot of times clicks and sequences. Like we're doing today. We got some sequences that we're playing with, and
we're gonna do a little bit of that.
So we're gonna use the in-ears to not only hear each other, but to also be able to lock into the different loops and stuff that are going on in the tracks. But are there any things with the because I know we've had some in-ear struggles together.
Yeah, the in-ears,
and I guess it's more we're still learning how to use the in-ears.
I would say the downside of the in-ears, the biggest thing for me is you don't hear a lot of the air that you would hear on stage that the amps are pushing. It's just kind of all going through this little speaker right in your skull, just pounding into the skull, and it also kind of cuts you off from the audience. I feel like you kind of get locked in your head, and I think it makes it more difficult to do the more improvisational playing. Mm-hmm. It certainly helps for singing backup vocals. You hear yourself so much better. Yeah. But there is a little bit of disconnect and cutting you off, and I think you could help that by make sure you keep your eyes open and watching the musicians that you're playing with and looking at your surroundings. And that could be a thing that's maybe a little counter too. When you get those in your ears, it's very easy to feel like you're just shutting off everything else. Like you're just, in your room with headphones on or something.
I feel like there's no air. Like it's like when you put like a Ziploc bag and you push all the air out. Like you're kind of like stuck in your own head.
Yeah.
So that's what I was gonna say is it becomes really important whether you're on wedges and especially if you're on in-ears, is to have your eyes open and make sure what you're hearing is balanced physically in a way. Like, because, if I can't hear something and if I'm struggling, I want to be able to watch someone's body and also like, make sure that like the energy that's being put out is what I'm hearing. And so you kind of have to learn to mix. It's like mixing a record in your ears a little bit.
And you can't be afraid to ask for some things at sound check.
Yeah.
I know that can be difficult, especially if you're working with an artist and you feel like, well, it's all about that artist. They need to get their sound good, and I can't really say anything. I just got to work with what I got. Of course, there's a limit to that. You don't want to come off as a diva. You don't want to, piss off any sensitive sound guys.
Yeah.
But you can't be afraid to be like, you know what, I actually cannot hear the kick drum, and that's important for the job I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and if there's a solution, you try to find it and you communicate it, and and sometimes it's not going to be perfect, but like I'm learning more and more of like just how to ride the wave with it. But in-ears take practice. So, but no matter how you're monitoring, maybe with your band, find solutions to where you can be in a little bit more control, and don't let the monitoring or sometimes the bad monitoring circumstances affect your playing and affect your physicality of how you're doing something. Try to practice monitoring and setting things up in a way to where you could still be musical.